Hello, Jeff Zwerink, and welcome back to Science Faith Connection, the segment of our show where we explore important scientific and philosophical ideas and see how they relate to the truth of Christianity. Today I'm joined by my friend and colleague Mark Perez, a philosopher, and we are going to look at some of the philosophical issues that arise when discussing evolution. Mark, good to have you in the studio today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
So normally we spend time talking about the evidence for this, that, junk DNA, the scientific stuff, but I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about some of the philosophical issues that arise when you discuss evolution. And I know you've encountered a number, so I'm just going to throw you the question. What sort of things arise philosophically that trouble you when we talk about evolution?
Well, one of the philosophical questions that arises is, it comes in the form of a question or a claim against Christians. Mm-hmm. And it's that Christians will look at the theory of evolution, for example, and say, well, you know what, you guys are just filling in the gaps with God. And so you're trying to explain what evolution would explain by using God instead. Mm-hmm. And that's actually not occurring, but there's a philosophical underpinning to that. And so if we were to start talking about philosophy of science and how it applies here, what we would see is that there's a metaphysical presumption, and that metaphysical presumption is that the only explanations that can be offered in science are explanations from nature to nature. In other words, mm-hmm. all physical events have to have physical causes. So when you hear someone say, well, you guys are just filling in the blanks with God because you don't know the answers to a particular question, you have to ask, what kind of questions does that really apply to? Mm-hmm. So where it typically applies is, for example, in origins questions. So if you think about what the theory of evolution is saying, and we'll define theory of evolution as the theory that says that humans and all the living things alive today descended from one or more last universal common ancestor, some microbe or microbes billions of years ago. Okay. So if that's what evolution is, it's the slow, steady creep and expansion of the diversity of life to get what we have here today, then one of the questions arises is, how did that originate? Mm-hmm. Where did it start? So that's one of the first places where Christians will say, you know, if we were to examine that question, we would say, look at the Bible. Mm-hmm. What does the Bible say? Well, the Bible says God created life. That's an interesting start. So that's a theistic perspective, and that's a theistic worldview. The naturalist worldview would say, no, we're not even going to include the possibility that God could be a cause of any kind of physical event.
So in some sense, you've got, it's like you can say, all right, well, we're looking for naturalistic explanations, but that's in some sense assuming a worldview or a constraint on how you're going to look at things. If you now say this discussion is on whether God exists, you've got this problem. Is that kind of where you're going? Or it seems to me that poses a problem there.
Yeah, it does. But in defense of the naturalist, you can't look at everything in nature and all of the scientific inquiries you could make, and when you can't figure it out, just point to God and say, well, God did it.
Right, yeah.
You have lightning, you can't say, well, God made the lightning, or the volcano, God made the volcano. What you can do is distinguish those kinds of things, the kinds of things where you can constantly have access to the information and constantly study them, against singular events. Mm-hmm. By singular events, I mean something that happens only once.
Like the origin of life.
Origin of life, yeah. Okay. There are a couple of others too, but we'll start with the origin of life.
So in some sense, there's this, it seems like there are two questions wrapped up in this. One is, what are we going to define science? Are we going to define science as only natural causes, or can we include supernatural causes? That's one discussion. And then the other one is, if we're going to say just within the naturalistic causes, do we have a way to claim anything about the supernatural based on what we find in science? It seems like there's two issues wrapped up in what you're bringing here.
There are a couple of issues. There are actually quite a few. But if we're going to answer the question about the claim that Christians are applying God of the gaps philosophy or technique to the origin of life, for example, what distinguishes that from the volcanoes and the lightning? Why don't we say that God did that? We're only saying the origin. Well, the reason is that when you look at the research and origin of life, they run into a wall. And not only do they run into a wall that that says that they can't find the answer, but that the more they dig, the more elusive it is. In other words, the more impossible it seems that life originated naturally. Now you go to the Christian perspective. The Christian perspective says, well, okay, we would expect that. We look at the Bible and it says that God created it whole cloth, de novo, not by some tiny little accretions. So we start out with two different ways of looking at the same evidence, and the two worldviews give you different answers. Now let's kind of move forward there. If you go from the origin of life and you say, all right, well, eventually we'll figure it out, says the naturalist. We'll get this figured out. Well, the problem is, as a matter of fact, the more they study it, the more they realize they can't figure it out, and they're resorting to things like panspermia, something from another planet came and dropped it off here. All that does is push it back further. It doesn't really solve the problem. So when you see those kinds of things happening, where scientists are saying, we can't figure this out, and so they come up with these extraordinarily unlikely scenarios that they can't prove any more than, say, a person who says that God did it. At that point, you have two theories, and one of them has more explanatory power than the other. For example, the Christian worldview says, well, let's look at origin of life for a second, but let's go a little bit ahead into life. Let's just leave that alone for a minute. Let's look at, say, a couple of the periods of life's history where some staggeringly complex creatures emerged all at once. One of them is what's known as the Avalon event or Avalon explosion. We have this large number of very complicated creatures just showing up about 580 million years ago, plus or minus. No explanation, none. There's no fossil record behind it that leads up to that.
Or at least there's not an explanation within the context of, it's just kind of this gradual process, if you will. So
yeah, not only gradual process, but even large leaps. There's no explanation there.
All right.
As a matter of fact, if you actually read the study on the discovery of that Avalon explosion, one of the authors said there are no descendant relationships that lead to what we see here.
Okay.
Which is a staggering conversation.
Right.
So how did they get there? The naturalist is saying, well, we're not quite sure yet. There could be this, could be that, could be that, all of which are completely speculative because they have no evidence. The Christian, however, says, well, let's go to our Bible. What would the Bible predict we'd find in this kind of evidence in the fossil record? Exactly what you found. God created each type after their own kind. So God created animals at different times, and he created them each after their own kind. We would expect that. So we would expect a sudden emergence of certain large-scale body plans, because we don't really know what kind means. The Bible isn't that clear. So certainly fish are different from mammals, are different from birds. We can say at least those three kinds.
So if I get that, it seems like there's a distinction between, well, lightning's out there, God did it, is kind of a, we don't understand, we don't want to do the work, whereas these others are, we've done the work and it looks like something beyond the natural is what's going on here. So it's really two different classes of things, and so Christians need to be careful not to just say, well, we don't know.
Correct.
As opposed to, hey, all the evidence seems to be pointing in this direction.
Yes. And what do the two theories predict? That's very important, because if the evolutionary theory would predict that you'd see a lot of buildup of more and more varied and diverse creatures leading up to this Avalon explosion, for example. It's not there.
Right.
What would you expect if you saw it, read the Bible, and took it literally? You would expect a sudden burst of these creatures of various kinds, and that's exactly what you find there. You find it later on, about 20 million years later, with the Cambrian explosion. Exactly the same problem. Sudden emergence of these widely divergent phyla. And all of a sudden, there's nothing between the Avalon and between the Cambrian.
Right.
How? The naturalists are completely stumped by that. And they admit it. It's not even something that Christians are saying, that they're saying. It's actually what's in their own literature. That we have no idea how this happened. They come up with speculations. They come up with hypotheses, but they're very difficult to test because you can't go back.
Right.
But again, which one of the two theories actually makes sense? Go back to the Bible. Would you expect this other, secondary, buildup of creatures. Yes, it exactly meets what the Bible would predict. Same thing with humanity. The emergence of humanity. You get the same problem there. Humans are unique, and they appear to have a set of properties that are different from all of the creatures that came before them. So how do you explain that? Well, the Bible's very clear about it. It has a Genesis account that tells God created humans, whole cloth, from nothing, not from creatures before it. So when you look at these kinds of things, and we as Christians say God did it, we're not just trying to fill in a gap where there's the absence of evidence. We're filling in a gap that's correspondent to our theory. The evidence actually fits our theory, but does not fit the evolutionary scheme.
Well, thanks, Marsh. I appreciate your comments. You know, when you look at Scripture, there are things in Genesis that the Bible says God created or God formed things, and we expect to see these kind of sudden appearance of things. And lo and behold, when we look at the scientific record, we find a lot of evidence of those things. And so as we think about using God or inviting God into our scientific explanations, we need to make sure, one, that we're not saying, well, we just don't know, therefore God did it. But we also need to be okay saying hey, we expect to find this when the evidence lines up. We could say, yeah, that's where God did it. You know, I'd encourage you to go to reasons.org. There's a great series of articles and podcasts that you can listen to if you search for Perspectives on Theistic Evolution that talk a lot about these philosophical issues as well as some of the scientific evidence that back them up. Go check it out, get equipped so that you can talk and be philosophically sound in how you're talking.